Hello, everyone. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. I have to say, this storyline has been sitting in the back of my mind ever since the first clues started falling into place. The more I think about Ethan Lovett and everything he's been doing lately, the more I believe we're watching a man carry a burden that gets heavier with every passing day. I've watched General Hospital for years, and one thing I've learned is that when someone starts making desperate choices, it's usually because they're terrified of what will happen if the truth comes out. That's exactly where Ethan seems to be right now. What really grabs my attention is that Ethan isn't fighting for money, power, or revenge. He's fighting to protect a little girl. Whether his methods are right or wrong is a completely different conversation, but I can't ignore the fact that everything he's done appears to be centered around keeping Phoebe safe. In his mind, he may believe he's standing between her and a nightmare that nobody else fully understands yet. When I look back at the history between Ethan and Delilah Wilson, I keep coming back to one detail that never felt ordinary. The fact that Ethan once burned photographs of Delilah speaks volumes. That's not something a person does on a whim. Those photographs represented memories, connections, and pieces of a shared past. Destroying them suggests fear, real fear. The kind of fear that comes from believing certain information could put lives at risk if it ever surfaced. That's why I don't think this story is simply about a paternity mystery anymore. I think it has evolved into something much darker. If Ethan was willing to erase physical evidence of his connection to Delilah, then he must have known far more about her situation than anyone realized. Looking back now, it almost feels as though he was trying to stay one step ahead of a threat that had been lurking in the shadows for years. Then came the moment when Alexis Davis discovered that photograph linking Ethan to Delilah. I remember thinking that the walls were finally closing in around him. Suddenly, the secret he had worked so hard to hide was no longer under his control. Alexis had questions, and once questions start being asked in Port Charles, answers usually aren't far behind. What fascinates me is how quickly Ethan changed his strategy after that discovery. Instead of continuing to deny any connection, he stepped forward and claimed to be Phoebe's father. At first glance, that might have looked like an emotional confession. Some viewers probably thought he had simply decided to tell the truth, but the more I examined the situation, the more I suspected there was another layer beneath the surface. That suspicion grew even stronger when Ethan arrived at General Hospital for the DNA test. On the surface, agreeing to the test should have settled everything. If he was truly Phoebe's biological father, there would have been nothing to worry about. Yet Ethan secretly switched the DNA sample while Elizabeth Baldwin wasn't paying attention. The moment that happened, everything changed. I have to admit, that scene raised more questions than answers for me. A man doesn't tamper with a DNA test unless he's afraid of the result. And Ethan wasn't just trying to avoid embarrassment or protect his reputation. He went through an elaborate plan involving evidence taken from PCPD's unsolved case files. That's an enormous risk. If he gets caught, the consequences could be devastating. What really sends chills down my spine is the possibility that the real father is connected to a criminal investigation from the past. Think about that for a moment. Ethan apparently believes the truth is so dangerous that he'd rather commit fraud than allow Phoebe's biological identity to be uncovered. That's not the behavior of someone hiding a harmless family secret. In fact, the more I think about it, the more I wonder if Ethan has known the identity of Phoebe's father all along. Maybe he knows exactly what kind of man this person is. Maybe he knows about crimes that were never fully solved. Maybe he knows that if Phoebe's connection to this individual becomes public, it could place her directly in danger. If that's the case, then Ethan's actions begin to look less like selfish deception and more like an act of desperate protection. Of course, that doesn't mean he's making the right choices. One thing I've learned from decades of watching soap operas is that lies have a way of growing larger every day they're left unchallenged. A lie might solve one problem today, but it usually creates 3 more tomorrow. Ethan may believe that a falsified DNA test will finally put this mystery to rest, but I have a hard time believing the story will end that neatly. After all, this is General Hospital. Secrets never stay buried forever. Someone always notices a detail that doesn't add up. Someone always asks the question everyone else overlooked. And when that happens, the fallout can be enormous. As I think about Ethan's situation, I can understand why he believes he has finally found a solution. In his mind, once the falsified DNA results are accepted and the private adoption is completed, the nightmare will be over. Phoebe will have a stable father figure, questions about her biological parentage will disappear, and the dangerous truth that has haunted him for so long can remain hidden forever. Looking at it from Ethan's perspective, this may seem like the only path forward. He has convinced himself that if he can carry this burden alone, Phoebe will never have to suffer because of the sins of the past. The problem is that secrets rarely stay buried in Port Charles. One thing I have learned after watching General Hospital for years is that the bigger the secret, the more likely it is to come crashing back into the lives of everyone involved. Ethan may believe he is creating a permanent shield around Phoebe, but every lie he tells only creates another crack in that shield. Sooner or later, someone will notice that something doesn't add up. Someone will ask a question that Ethan cannot answer, and once that happens, the entire story could begin to unravel. What really caught my attention in the summer spoilers is the suggestion that a familiar face from Ethan's past is about to return. That detail feels incredibly important to me because it arrives at exactly the wrong time for Ethan. Just when he thinks he is close to securing Phoebe's future, someone connected to his past suddenly resurfaces. In soap operas, that is rarely a coincidence. In fact, it often signals the beginning of a major revelation. The returning figure could very well be Phoebe's biological father, but even if it isn't, it could be someone who knows the truth about him. It could be an old associate, a former enemy, or someone who was directly connected to the criminal events that Ethan has been trying so desperately to conceal. Another clue that keeps standing out to me is the spoiler indicating that Ethan will eventually be forced to run. That alone tells me that his problems are about to become much bigger than keeping a secret. People don't abandon their lives and go on the run because they are worried about being caught in a lie. They do it when they believe a real threat is coming. To me, that suggests someone powerful, dangerous, and connected to the past is moving closer to the truth. Fortunately for Ethan, it appears that Ava Jerome will arrive at exactly the right moment. I have always viewed Ava as someone who knows how to survive impossible situations. She has faced criminals, betrayals, and life-threatening crises before, and she rarely backs down when things get dangerous. Her involvement makes me think she may quickly recognize the seriousness of whatever Ethan is facing. If a hidden enemy truly is returning to Port Charles, Ava could become one of the few people capable of helping Ethan stay one step ahead. As for the mystery surrounding Phoebe's biological father, I keep coming back to the same thought. The writers seem to be building toward a reveal that longtime viewers will instantly recognize. The clues point towards someone with a significant connection to Port Charles, someone whose name would shock both the characters and the audience. Ethan may believe he can control the story through forged DNA results and legal paperwork, but the truth has a way of finding its way to the surface. And if that truth leads back to a notorious figure from the past, the consequences could be enormous, not only for Ethan and Phoebe, but for many other people as well. In the end, I don't think Ethan's plan is destined to fail because he lacks determination. On the contrary, he has shown extraordinary commitment to protecting Phoebe. The problem is that he is fighting against forces that are much larger than himself. The past is beginning to resurface, old secrets are starting to move again, and the appearance of a familiar face could trigger a chain reaction that nobody can stop. Ethan may succeed in delaying the truth for a little while longer, but I have a feeling that this mystery is heading toward a dramatic and emotional explosion that will change everything.